Right, so this represents a look inside the mind of a systems thinker or an entrepreneur. And there's multiple layers of what's going on in here. Let me show you what I mean. So what we have is a multiple layers, and I want to talk about this central layer first. So this inner bracket, and you notice that it's open, indicating a semi-open system. These are the things that are on an entrepreneur's mind, a systems thinker's mind all the time. First, a concern with the purpose of whatever activity we're engaging in. We're engaging in activity for a reason, and so we have some kind of end state or goal in mind. And the very next thing is, what is my risk? Because I'm venturing into this problem and opportunity space, and I want to know how to get out of it if I have to, and what am I risking by engaging in a particular activity. We try to problem find, and so if we say problem, before I problem solve, which is where I want to go, I have to first problem frame it. I have to decide that the problem that I'm trying to solve, that should read solve, sorry about that. Yeah. It is customary to just jump in as if you know what's going on, and you just try to problem solve. Well, if you're trying to solve the wrong problem, or it's a different problem from the way you're trying to solve it, that's a problem of framing, that you actually have a different kind of problem, and so you're trying to solve it in the wrong way, or you're using a model or a process or a solution that's not well suited for the kind of problem that you actually have. So before we want to solve that problem, we want to back up a step and make sure that we framed it correctly. So if I'm trying to solve it with a hammer, I want to make sure that it's a nail. So problem framing is a classification issue. What kind of a problem is it? If I know what kind of a problem it is, I know that there are certain tools and methods and processes that can be applied to solve a particular kind of problem. So problem framing is a classification issue. And so one of the things that I got to be concerned with is, how many different kinds of problems do I know about? And how many of them do I have a tool for that could work? And is this thing that I'm working on, is it one of those? So the criteria to classify in order to identify it, to bound it in time and space, to categorize it, to classify it, then I can choose from my array of more or less satisfactory tools and pick the one, that's that kind of a problem, and now I have the right tool. Now that I have framed it, I can now proceed to solve it. So a systems thinker will often just back up and make sure that I've got the right problem frame in place. Well, before you even start framing it, what we're concerned with is finding the right problem. So if I'm in an environment and I can see that there's all of these possible problems out here, and then I decide I'm going to jump into this one, then as I start investigating that local area, before I just start solving it, that's where I'm going to back up and do the problem frame and make sure that I've got the right problem frame, that I can try and solve that thing. But there's kind of a triage. problem, and a priority problem that says, of all the things that I might work on, which one offers me the best reward to risk ratio in the shortest amount of time? And now this becomes not only a priority and a triage problem, but also could be looked at as an asset allocation problem. Given that I have a certain amount of resource, time, skill, money, and I have certain interests and a risk profile, when I scan that environment E and I see all the things that might be done, the number of possible strategies out there are immense. Like, do I want to try to solve those three things at once? Or just pick the one that has the highest payoff? Or the one that reduces my total risk the most? Or the one that looks easiest to accomplish fast? Or one that really aligns with my two favored skills? And if I see a problem that really aligns with my skill set and gives me confidence, I might use that as a way to start selecting from among the possible problems. So problem finding is really a significant issue for leaders and managers, because you're under a time pressure, and all the time that you spend thinking about it is time that you are losing from your resources. So there's a cost of dithering, or a cost of analyzing. And how fast is that environment changing? So all of those factors make step 0, problem finding, really significant, and then framing and then solving. Only after I have found which for me is the right problem, then I want to frame it in the correct way, and then I can go about applying the tool that seems to be aligned with that kind of a problem. So then if I have multiple tools, obviously this is all part of the problem solving, is that I can now structure that and decide which of the strategies or capabilities or options that I have seem to be best suited for solving the kind of a problem that I have at lowest cost with minimum acceptable risk and so forth, or highest probability of trade-off. And I still have to structure the strategy to solve that. But if I just jump right into problem solving too soon, I really run the risk of mischaracterizing the problem or working on the wrong thing. So this issue here is really significant. And that's why we want to think about purpose and risk first before we start just jumping in and fiddling around with the problem, because you need both of those factors locked in your head so that you can properly judge which problem you want to work on. Once I've found and framed the problem, I can then start thinking about the method that I'm going to apply. And now there should be some relationship between the method I choose and the kind of problem I have. But there's also a factor of skill involved there as well, that the method I chose should somehow relate to the skills I have. Or it may be, if this is a low risk opportunity, the thing I may be doing may be for the purpose of development and not necessarily for the most efficient solution, but I can actually be working on a training problem in order to develop skills in a method and on a low risk opportunity. And I might be willing to accept inefficient problem solving in order to invest in skill development that's going to pay off later on higher priority projects when I need some skill at that method. A systems thinker looks at solutions also within this bracket, and it's a small s, because a systems thinker will typically look at solutions as iterative and temporary, and we might be looking just for sufficing. In other words, finding a solution that meets the minimum constraints as quickly as possible in order to get some action initiated, rather than doing an exhaustive search for the best possible solution, I might find myself in the case where a good enough solution fast is all that I really need. So the extra brackets around solution means that once I have found and framed and started solving the problem, I have to consider my purpose and risk in order to decide what a good enough solution looks like, or what my strategy for finding solutions are. So this is always kind of an ongoing thing. Now, a systems thinker, once they start engaging in activity, will be looking for insights from the activity. So if I've started to plan and prepare and start executing, my problem solution, as a result of doing those things, if I can assess what's going on while I'm doing it, that may lead to a moment of insight or questions that now become important. So the information that I gain from starting the activity starts giving me the information and insights that I need, that may end up causing me to reframe the problem, or realize I need to go find a better problem because the environment might have changed because of the actions I took. Or I might have been operating on some assumptions and then found out from activity that my assumption was a bad one. A practical systems thinker is always going to be concerned with the decisions that have to be made or might be made, so optional versus required, and really the time dimension in which decisions must be made. When's the latest time I can make that decision and still be effective? Because there's a time trade-off in there, that if I'm trying to gather more information or develop more options or secure more resources or reshape the environment with other activities so it's good for me to defer, well, all of those factors go hand in hand when it comes time to deciding what decisions do I have to make, and then how efficiently and effectively can I put those actions into motion, and how well prepared am I for those, and what's the results and the feedback. And so assessment is finally is taking a look at all of these on an ongoing basis, continuous assessment of what's going on, because that's going to come back and maybe cause us to relook for problems or reframe them or try to solve them in a different way. So the continuous assessment is part of a commitment to continuous learning. So the assessment is not just a grade of performance, but it also gives insights onto the quality and effectiveness of the things that are on the inside center of our mind right here. And that's what that inner bracket looks like. So systems thinkers tend to have all that on their mind continuously. I'm now going to scale up and say that a systems thinker looks at themselves as one of the actors inside a larger environment that is, we might influence it, but it's out of our direct control, and we are definitely influenced by it. And that environment contains actors, forces, structures, and context, and certainly a lot of VUCA, as you recall, the volatility, how fast things change, how often, and what magnitude, and in what rhythm. Uncertainty, which deals with what percentage of available possible information do we even know. So if there's that much that can be known and I only know this much, then this is my area of uncertainty. And how certain am I that I actually even know these things? And how much does VUCA change what it is that I once knew? So that's what uncertainty is dealing with. And then complexity has to do with the number of variables in that environment, because the interplay of variables is what gives you your computational complexity. If there's only one variable, then I only have to know one thing. If there's two variables, I have to know three things. I have to know something about variable A and B and something about the relationship of A, B. So 2 variables means I got to know 3 things. 3 variables, A, B, C. I got to know A, B, A, C, B, C, and A, B, C. So I got to know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So as the number of variables goes up arithmetically, the complexity goes up geometrically. And so the idea of complexity is really an assessment of how many actors and forces and structures are in that environment. And then context is the understanding of how all that stuff fits together. And so complexity at some point may tell you that you can't possibly compute all of those changes. And so you have to adopt something other than brute force rational utility models. You might need a different decision principle and a strategy principle, rather than just the exhaustive comparison of possible courses of action by some known set of variables. And then finally, ambiguity has to do with the fact that sometimes this little set of facts will equally support explanation 1 and explanation 2. And you might know that these things are mutually exclusive. Like you can't live in a world in which both 1 and 2 are correct and possible. It's got to be either one or the other. But then you have a set of facts that are consistent with explanation 1 and explanation 2. So knowing those facts isn't helping you. In fact, it's making it more difficult because it's not ruling out any alternatives. So this environment that we're working in, which changes over time because of that volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, time passes, change happens, performance is measured. That performance may give some information, and those actions have consequences, which feeds back and changes the shape and the understanding of the environment anyway. Well, now if I drill down a level inside my own brain, these are models right here. The IPB, or Intel Prep of the Battlefield, is a military construct which says you got to see the terrain, the environment, see the enemy, and see yourself. That if you understand those 3 things, only then can you begin to develop plans that are better than random chance. And UVIDLA is the process that a military staff and commander go through to try to understand what's going on, to visualize those things in motion, to describe what they see, to direct specific actions by subordinates, to lead them in the execution of that mission, and then assess the overall performance. So you can see there's a real strong connection to business and trading as well as military operations. Well, both of these are mental models that help the professional do better than random. They are ways to give you shortcuts to standard work and standard practices and improve your performance. Plan, prepare, execute, and assess. A process we can go through to say, where are we in the development of a solution to our problem, and then how well is it going? So this is a way to organize crucial activities, especially with the staff, and to know where you are in that operations process. At the same time, I might be trying to do things like develop a learning organization that gives me more skills that I can call upon to solve future problems. I can be looking at the importance of accomplishing missions so I can get rewards and then move on to the next objective to build on that previous success. So accomplishing the missions is an end state in its own right. There's a reason to do it, not just for development, but because it actually is tangible. I want to improve capabilities. I want to develop people and systems. I want to be ready to do things. So this block here look like principles that are part of the way we shape our choices, and it supports thinking in this way, but it often manifests as activities that try to accomplish these principles or goals. The idea of continuous estimates, professional competence, due diligence, effective communication, trust, and confidence, these are organizational individual qualities that go into making high-performance teams. And the idea of duty might be one that is a value that influences choices and actions and methods inside that systems thinker's brain. So every systems thinker, depending on their circumstance and context, has these habits of mind and habits of behavior and values and principles that shape the activity of thinking and doing that are at the center of that systems thinker's world. And all of that's being conducted inside an environment, and that environment is changing, and it is shaping what you're thinking about in the context you're thinking in, and it's shaping the way you understand how well these things work over here. So the idea behind that diagram is to capture in a semi-open system the relationship between these multi-echelons of simultaneous activity and existence, and that systems thinking is necessarily iterative and ongoing and operates inside this kind of semi-open feedback, information-rich environment. Okay, so that's what I want to say about that diagram. Four bad assumptions about risk that come out of the world of entrepreneurial operations and organizational excellence. This idea that the bad assumption is that taking action is the biggest risk, when in fact it might be that failure to take action, inaction, might itself be the bigger risk. And so it's not enough just to itemize the active things going on or trying to evaluate risk between affirmative choices that you make, but the time that you spend thinking about it is time that you're not taking action. And it may be that inaction is the biggest. It's a bad idea to celebrate failure, to encourage risk-taking. Like, you'll see a lot of literature that says, hey, I'm going to underwrite the mistakes of my people. We want to fail faster and, in order to learn, and to not be afraid to take risks. Whereas we want to make that habit of mind context dependent, that there are certain times in which the failure may be worth celebrating. Celebrating almost feels over the top, but that word is chosen in literature in order to try to offset the very paralyzing risk aversion that comes from zero defect mentality. So maybe you have to overcorrect, you think, in order to celebrate failure. But I've actually seen young leaders who've been told that it's okay to fail, and so they don't perform the due diligence or perform to a professional grade of expectations because they believe that any failure is really okay and that doesn't mean anything. But there are consequences to failure. So the context of what failure means should tell you whether or not celebration is appropriate. So a more responsible posture is to say that failure in the context of due diligence and professional grade is the difference between a businessman's risk and just outright gambling. Believing that good entrepreneurs seek out risk as if simply putting yourself in a risky environment is the end state or the desirable objective. But no, it really has to do more with managing risks. Because if you find yourself taking risks that at some point generate a mathematical probability of extinction, it's just, and you're in the habit of just doing that, then it's simply a matter of time. It's when and not if that you'll blow up. So the management of risk means also that you've got to seek out the risk in the same way that inaction might be the biggest risk. Managing the risk is all about trying to continuously monitor the risk and reward and the probabilities and the shaping that you can do to minimize risk while preserving rewards, to understand what your risk reward profile looks like in a certain situation. What is the distribution of possible results and maybe the probabilities of them if you can. All of that goes into the effective management of risk. There is a mistaken thought that rewarding success will boost risk taking, when in fact what it does is make it almost emphasizes the end result as rather than having good process along the way. Like rewarding a poker player because they won a hand, even if the decisions that they made expose them to too much risk based on the probabilities of success. So you don't want the success itself to be the only criterion for rewards. You want to examine the process that is used as well. And so a better solution, according to these authors, is that eliminating the punishment for failure, and that's provided that due diligence and professional grade was in place. That eliminating punishment just because a guy failed, if it was a proper risk to take within our parameters and the payoff made it worth taking the risk, then that is a risk that should be taken, and you shouldn't be punishing that. You should actually be rewarding them for finding, framing, and then executing a good effort, one that over time will pay off for you. Okay, so that's what I want to say about assumptions about managing risk, and this applies to a wide variety of circumstances. So this diagram is going to help us work through a systematic approach to developing strategies. Sorry about that. All right, so the first step this is a visual model that is designed to support solution finding. So I want you to imagine just any circumstance where you're trying to figure out what to do. And this just happens to be about a local soccer club. This could be really, though, anything. And in the SWOT analysis, one of the first step that we're going to do is to analyze by SWOT. So we do an investigation and we say, all right, we're going to do an internal assessment first, and we're going to look at the organization's strengths and weaknesses. And so you could imagine how you could make a list of all of those things. And then we're going to do an external assessment of the environment and realize that in the environment there are opportunities that might be seized to add value, and then there are a number of threats in the environment that might pose a risk. So stage one, or step one, is to analyze and describe these features, the SWOT. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to generate possibilities. And there are 4 categories of possible strategies. And this is the sequence that I usually recommend. So category 1 is where we're going to start pairing our strengths against the opportunities that we see. And so as I start doing this comparison, it might be that I could take, Plenty of leadership mentor candidates. Like I've got a lot of people that need to be mentored inside my club. But I also have a very strong volunteer ethic and community support. So it may be that I can match these volunteer supporters from the community who have skills with all of the mentor candidates that need that kind of mentoring. And so I could now start partnering community leaders with senior players or coaches that need more experience, or parents who are interested in supporting and who might benefit from a relationship with a community leader. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use creativity to come up with all of these category 1 strategies, and this is how we win. And I want to win big by putting my strengths onto the opportunities. And I'm just looking for ways to exploit success. Win big. Now, the next category that I look at is category 2, and that is where I consider the threats in the environment and see if those threats could exploit my weaknesses. Like, for instance, there's a lot of for-profit clubs and alternatives out there, and we suffer when we have unsteady funding. So if I don't address the value add that we create, then it might be too easy for people to make choices to go to for-profit clubs, and then that loss of income from families that are supporting us with fees may actually start to inhibit our performance. So one of the things that I might have to do is, marketing or advertising, or are describing what it is our value add is. So I'm looking for maybe some low cost ways where I can prevent the threats from exploiting my weaknesses. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to list a bunch of things by using creativity to see, here's all the places I'm weak, here are the things that are out there that could be hurtful and harmful. What can I do to put barriers between or to avoid those in order to prevent that threat from exploiting my weakness? Now, similar but a slightly different approach is category 3, and that is I'm going to be taking a look at my weaknesses and comparing it to the opportunities that are in the environment to say, are there some low-cost, low-risk things that I can do with the opportunities that are available that will start taking away some of these weaknesses or making it less weak? So I'm not waiting for the threat to get on me and trying to prevent that. I'm just trying to reduce the number of places that I can be vulnerable, but in a low cost and low risk way. So this makes it harder to lose because I'm playing good defense. And this one over here, these might be avoidance or blockage strategies. Prevention is another way to think of it. So there's a real distinction between those 3 categories so far. And then finally, it may be that the threat is so powerful or persistent or risky if it's successful that I may need to actually use some of my strengths to start finding ways to defeat the threats before they can get on my weakness. So I'm going to, instead of using my strengths in here, I might have to put some of those strengths over in here, and where I have to attack and defeat the threats. So that's going to take a very different form. Instead of using my strength to win, I'm going to use my strength to defeat the opponent. In the long run, it may amount to the same thing, but it's a very different form of strategy. So now in round 2, what I've done is I've generated 4 categories of strategies. And in round 3, what I'm going to do is choose a portfolio of action. So I'm going to find some mix of these things where I'm taking maybe things from category 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm going to realize I've only got so much resources of time, skill, people, money, leverage, infrastructure, whatever my resources may be. And I've got to decide how to allocate those against category 1, 2, 3, and 4, and maybe try to find ways that I can gain synergy inside here and get double duty. And so I'm going to try to figure out the best mix of possible strategies to my chosen strategy. So now I'm choosing a portfolio of actions, and I got to be concerned with reward to risk and payoff, and diversification, and time and momentum. So all of those things go into choosing the actual strategy package that I put together. So what we're looking at then is a way to just start from a rich description of listing qualities and features of our organization or our situation, and then about the environment that we're operating in. Yeah, and this is what we would call the modified SWOT, because the SWOT analysis is not the end state. All that SWOT analysis does is give you these listings of those features. But you have to do something with that. And so this intermediate step recognizes that there are distinct kinds of strategies that have different purposes. But then at the end of the day, my final strategy is going to be a mix of all those multi-purpose things to do, or projects, or individual strategies into my grand strategy, if you will. Okay, so that's what I want to say about that. All right, so now we're going to take a look at another layer of a model that we can add to the modified SWOT analysis that we did last time. So I want you to think about it like in these terms. Like we have this world over here, this kind of a playing field, and there's a lot of things going on in that world. And we said, man, that's really complex, and where do I even start, and all that stuff. So the first thing that we can do to add a little order to this is impose our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats model onto this. And so one of the things that we might do then, as we saw in the last example, is we might just take a look at our own organization down here and say, well, we have these strengths, and we just start listing them. And we also have these weaknesses. We're going to list those. So we're starting to see our organization from a strength and a weakness perspective. And then when we look inside the environment around us, the external environment, we can say, here's an opportunity that if I could just navigate my way over to there, then that could be a real benefit. And then, so I'm going to go through here and identify, opportunities. And at the same time, I say, there's a threat. There's a man-eating tiger over here. So I've got this very complex environment. But this systematic way of analyzing these components gives us the ability to start developing possible strategies, as we saw in the last little lesson. And so the way that we described was, we said, well, let me put my strengths against the opportunities and then generate category 1 strategies. How do I win big? By putting my strengths onto the weaknesses. And here's some things I can do. And then maybe my second priority is, how do I not lose? And that is, when I consider the threats and my own weaknesses, what are some things that I can do that make it more difficult or impossible for the threat to find me or get after me or to be successful. Low cost, low risk ways of avoidance or hiding from detection. And then the third category, third priority would be, what are some, when I look at the opportunities out there, are there some low cost, low risk ways in which I can start eliminating some of these weaknesses so I can get stronger, actually, by eliminating some of these weaknesses. So maybe some low cost ways of doing it. The example at the break was, well, it's cheaper to eat healthier and you don't have to buy as much medicine, or you don't lose downtime from being sick, and you have more energy. So by getting healthier, by better eating, then I have reduced my weaknesses and made it harder for the disease to get after me. And that's a low cost way. That might actually end up turning a weakness into a strength. And that's something I want to do. So that's category 3. And then category 4 is where I might have to use my strength against a threat in order to defeat his potential to get on my weakness. So I may not just, hope may not be enough of a course of action. I might have to take active measures to defeat those threats. And then category 5 is when I've considered all of those 4 sets of strategies. So I get category 1, 2, 3, and 4 strategies here. And I've listed all the things that I might do. Category 5 becomes, well, I'll pick maybe a couple of these and a couple of those and some of those. And so I'm going to integrate from that list and come up with my chosen plan that represents the best use of my limited resources, considering reward to risk ratios and time and performance and probability. So category 5. Well, I say all that as a review simply to say another model that we can put on this is the Miles and Snow typology. And so what they identify are categories of people, but also categories of strategy. It may be, as you look at your people and the strategies that are available, that some guys are just really good at defending. So if you have people or processes or organizations that are good defenders, a defender strategy is something that's like a category 2. A defender, draw this in, let me draw this in green. So a defender is probably concerned with, I should say this way, right? Because what we're trying to do is defend our weaknesses. And so that defender strategy could improve our weakness, or it could help us with avoidance. So all a defender is trying to do is to protect our weaknesses. So a defender is a person who's really well suited to take on projects in category 2 and 3. A prospector is really good at category 1 because they're the ones who are doing the investigations to seize opportunities with our strengths. They're the guys that are looking at all of the potentials, the entrepreneurial thinkers. Now, a reactor is a person who's in this category. And what they are doing is they are really threat-oriented. So the threat can do things to us. So a reactor is trying to look at strategies that will defeat the threat. And then finally, the analyzer is really this person in the middle. This analyzer, or category 5, is the guy who can say, well, I understand all these different strategies and these different kinds of people. Here's the best way I have analyzed to employ the resources and people and organizations that we actually have. So the Miles and Snow typology is a further refinement. So when I put Miles and Snow's methodology on here, I end up having an even deeper appreciation for the kinds of things that go into that modified SWOT analysis. And so this is an example of how effective models can help us simplify some of this complex world. And now we can go through a systematic process that allows us to generate these category 5 integrated strategy package. Okay. So the Miles and Snow typology, and I'll leave that up there for you to read a little bit on. All right. So now the next one up is the walking man. This is our guy here, the walking man. And the walking man has 5 ways of knowing, or the 5 knowledges. And the first one is the knowledge of the head. And the head is rational thought. It's thinking, it's conceptualizing, it's the theory. And the second way of knowing is the knowledge of the heart. Knowledge of the heart is that self-identity that is connected to emotions, values, identity, and purpose. And the knowledge of the gut has to do with the knowledge that comes from contending with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the dreaded FUD. So the head is thinking about things up here on a theoretical perspective. That heart is concerned about feelings and emotions and about where we want to go. The gut doesn't care about any of that stuff. The gut is out here looking at the enemy and threats and saying, uh-oh, here's risk coming in, and fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and that shapes our overall understanding and our knowledge. The job of the gut is to be out there as early warning beyond our perimeter here and saying, where is the risk coming from? And then the knowledge of the hands is the knowledge of how to do things in a practical way. So the head knows things theoretically, and the heart wishes it were so, and the gut's worried about things that can go wrong. But the hands have that onboard knowledge of just exactly how to do things. It's skillful action. And then the knowledge of the feet is the knowledge that comes from this body in motion. It's how to endure a complex world where there are obstacles and maybe intermediate setbacks. So it's endurance and resilience. It's your cardio, right? And one of the things that we have along the way, this path that we're walking towards our objective, is we have these little waypoints along the way, and think of them as roundabouts. And you can enter them from any direction, and other people do. And as you go around that roundabout, some of these different R words happen. You can rest, recuperate, you can relax, refocus. You can relate your stories to others. And you can recognize truth in others and allies. and you can reconnoiter that next future path. And so you've got this little series of rest halts and roundabouts and journeys along the way. And you choose this path to walk based on who you are and what you're about. And so those risks and rewards around that storytelling fireplace, or that fire pit, is a place where you can start building that network of action, that collaborative team, that tribe that can cooperate and graduate. And so when you enter those stories, those story circles and roundabouts, who are you and what do you stand for? What are your values and principles? Are you a truthful person? Are you transparent? Are you a good neighbor? Do you treat people with kindness and courtesy and care? Are you a craftsman in what you do? Do you share? Do you care for the weak and protect them? So all of that stuff is what you bring into that story circle. Well, when people get together and form organizations, we can look at it through the Shingo model lens, gratefully received from the folks who rebuilt Japan after World War II on the principles of Dr. Deming and Schuhart, and developed the Toyota production system, the machine that changed the world, and found ways to build self-directed work teams that could simultaneously think revolutionary thoughts about the next big objective from wherever we are, but also how to make evolutionary changes each model year along the way. And so you get the best of evolution and revolution, and linking back up at these checkpoints. So we get the new grand design from the last big cycle, and then we start building it, and we learn along the way, and trusting our people and learning how to do things incrementally better, while at the same time our R&D guys are taking a look at the next grand strategy. So as new technology or whatever is coming into the marketplace, as it matures and is now ready to get into the design here, we're not just resting, we're getting better each day in every way here, but we're also taking advantage of that deeper look. And this combination of evolution and revolution is what Shingo is all about. And the guiding principles of Shingo are, what are the cultural enablers that maybe come out of who our people are and how we behave and how we conduct ourselves in our gatherings? What are the cultural enablers that allow us to collaborate and cooperate? And then there's a commitment to continuous improvement in everything that you do through constant assessment. And then a process of continuous enterprise alignment so that every individual activity at the lowest level in work groups are all nested together in a business center, and maybe the business centers are energized and integrated at the total enterprise level, so that everything we do is aligned together and moving with synchronicity. And the purpose then being to apply those general principles to build a sustainable culture of organizational excellence. So this Shingo model looks very much like our roundabout, I discovered, a happy circumstance. And there's two ways around it. So if we started with the guiding principles, we could say we want to start with the guiding principle and ensure that we use that to align the systems that we use to conduct our processes. So we want to use principles to align the systems. And then the systems, once aligned, are going to help us select the tools that we're going to need to be able to perform work inside of those systems. And then we're going to use those tools mindfully in order to achieve results. And that those results that we get if we are well aligned, should affirm the guiding principles that got us started in the first place. Awesome. And then seeing the other way, we want to ensure that we're using our guiding principles to drive us towards the kind of results that we want. And then when we get those results, we can use those results to feed back towards a refinement of the tools. So the results help us have a deeper understanding of how to use the tools that got us that set of results. And then once we've used those results to refine our tools, those tools enable us to improve our systems because of our deeper understanding of how to use these things properly. And that the systems that we choose to improve and then operate with are actually driving us to maybe refine our guiding principles based on the understanding and opportunities that come out of the systems which use tools to get results. So this bidirectional traveling from principles to systems to tools to results and back to principles, and then from principles to results to tools to systems and back to principles, all of that taken together, all of those activities and the way that we do them start shaping the behaviors that we engage in day to day with our peers and our customers and our competitors and the world around us. And all of that collectively is what creates the culture that represents who we are at a deep and fundamental level. That culture is the heart of who we are. It's not what we say we are, but it's what we do that's what we are. And so those guiding principles help us be mindful about all the behaviors and all these verbs about aligning and selecting and enabling and achieving and refining. All of those are activities. Those are actions. That is behavior. And all of those behaviors are done in a certain way and seen through the lens of culture. And when other people are watching us do what we do, the things that we do define what they think our culture is. And our culture essentially becomes those things that we do and why we do them. So, as we now think then about the walking man and the knowledge of his head, heart, gut, hands, and feet, and how he engages in these roundabouts with others as he goes through these processes towards his objective, we can think then of the culture that emerges from the way we behave and the way the people in our tribe behave and those we associate with. And so this Shingo guiding principles and the Shingo model helps us see in a dynamic operational way how all of these things fit together in a unity. So this was the story of when the walking man met Shingo on the road. It was a very memorable moment. It happened for me on January, February, March, April, May. May 15th, 2020 is when those two models collided for the first time. The Shingo model.